So here are the two cards. I love this design. And out of the two of these, I like the background of the lighter card better, but I like this flower on the card better. So what I've decided to do is combine the two and make this flower to go on this card. And that way we'll have three different looks. We'll have a light background with a more vibrant dark colored flower, then we'll have the darker background with a lighter color flower, and then we'll have a lighter background and a lighter flower. So we'll just see which one we like the best. So I'm going to slide these over to the side. I'm going to tell you everything you'll need to create this project. So first of all, we're going to start out with a card base of crumb cake. This is cut to 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. So this is going to be a side opening card like this. Then you'll need several pieces of Very Vanilla. And what I've done is I've just cut these into strips. They're not any particular size. Most of them are about 2 inches wide, and on average they're probably about 4 inches long. I've got, I'm not even sure how many I have here. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got about 9 or 10 strips, so you'll want to have quite a few of those. I have this larger piece of Very Vanilla, and I've got this cut to 6.5 by 5 1/4. We're going to do some tearing on that, and that's going to end up looking like this. So I've got that. You'll need a couple of pieces of Pear Pizzazz. One is 3.5 by 3.5, and the other one is 2 by 4.5, and then a sheet of the gold foil sheet for the little background that you see right here, and this is 2.5 by 5. So the inks I'm using are chocolate or early espresso, lemon lime twist, Berry Burst, and Garden Green. The stamp set that I'm using is one that is a free stamp set during Celebration. I know you've probably heard me and a gazillion other people talk about Celebration, but between now and the end of March, you can actually get free product from Stampin' Up! Just by shopping at my online store, and I'll tell you more about that as we go on. The framelit set, or the thinlits I'm using today, is the Eclectic Layers Thinlits. Now let me move these out of the way because I have a few punches that I'm going to be using today I want to share with you. I've got the Flower Builder punch, my 3/4 inch circle punch, and what was this one called? The Daisy Builder punch, maybe? Can't remember for sure right now what the name of this was, but I'll have it listed right up here at the top of the page. The very first thing that I want to do is grab this larger piece of Very Vanilla. What I've done is I've gone in with my Stampin' trimmer and I've just scored a line 1/4 or 1/2 of an inch in from all sides. And then you can do this a number of different ways. At first I just took my paper and I just tore it like this, but I felt like maybe this was too wide in some places, so what I've decided to give a try is to just take my bone folder and use that as a guide. And it's still going to tear kind of wide in some places, but I can always come in there and just tear that off. I want this kind of ruffled, rough edge right there. Then we're going to end up using some of our early espresso ink, and we're going to distress that a little bit. So you can do this tearing whatever is the easiest method for you. I just feel like this is a great way for me to get it torn pretty quick and fairly straight. Okay, I'm going to toss those aside. Now what I want to do is take this and lay it on the front of my card, and I feel like it's way too big. So I'm going to bring my bone folder back in, and I'm going to tear this just a little bit more because I do want it to be smaller to fit on the front of my card. Now let's try that again. Oh, I like that much better. So that is my reason for cutting this piece quite a bit bigger than the front of my card, is so that I have some room to tear it down and get it just the size I wanted. Because if I made it the exact size of my card front, I'm afraid that when I start tearing it, I would end up making it too small. So it's easier to take paper away because you cannot add it back. So what I'm going to do first is grab my early espresso. And Sugar is in here with me, and she has a toy and she is killing it. So if you hear crazy noises in the background, it's just my goofy little dog. So I'm just taking my early espresso and one of my Stampin' sponges, and I'm just going around the edges and darkening those up. So I'm going to add some of that ink into the lid of my ink. Then I'm going to take my aqua painter. If you don't have an aqua painter, you could use a regular paintbrush and some water in a glass. And to test it out, I'm just going to put some right up here. I feel like I need more of that ink, so here we go. And I'm just going to splatter it on my card just by tapping my aqua painter against my finger. I don't want a whole lot of color on there, I just want a little bit. So there we have that. Now to attach this to the card front, I'm going to use my foam adhesive strips, and I'm just going to run a few of those right down the card. Get those pressed down really well. Then I'm just going to pull the adhesive backing off and stick that to the front of my card. Okay, so there's that. I'm liking the way that looks already. Now I want to go ahead and get all of my flowers punched out, so I'm going to use my Blossom Builder punch, and I'm going to grab all of these very vanilla strips of paper that I had, and these are the two petals that I'm going to be using right here and right here. And what I'm doing is I'm just sticking them in at an angle, punching those out. Then I'll turn it around to the other side, slide that in again, and punch again. I went ahead and punched out my little daisy with my daisy punch, and I also ran my Eclectic Layers Thinlits through the Big Shot, and I cut out two of these here, and out of that same piece of paper I used my 3/4 inch punch and punched out the center of my flower. So here's how I color these. I start out with my lemon lime twist and a sponge dauber, and I just take it and go all around the outside edge of my petals. Then I jump over to my Berry Burst, turn my petal this way, and I do a dragging motion on this. I start out at the bottom and put the concentration of color down there, and then work my way up toward the green, and by the time I get up there, most of that color is going to stay down at the base of my petal. Now I am making these flowers a little more vibrant than I did the other one on the dark colored background card, just because I don't want it to blend all the way into the background. This is my garden green, and I'm only doing this on the smaller petals because these are going to be tucked under these smaller ones and you're not going to see that, but I wanted that center to have a more shadowed effect, so I've added that really dark green there. So I don't need these two colors anymore, but I do want to keep my garden green out. And in order to give these leaves a little more dimension, I'm just going to dab a little bit of color onto them. And I'm going to try to primarily just keep it to one side. Then for this little round piece, I'm just going to go in little circles, go all the way around the outside edge. Now in order to shape all of your petals, and I have punched a bunch out and colored quite a few because it depends on how full and thick you want your flowers. This one, for example, has a couple more petals than this one does. So it's all up to you and how full you want your flower to be. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my Pierce mat, and I'm going to use a combination of things. You can use a anything that you have that has a rounded end to it. I was actually going to go to Hobby Lobby today and pick up some of those larger ball stylus, but I've got other things to do and I can use this. So if you don't have those stylus that have the larger ball on the end, you can use anything you have, such as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the end, and this is my piercing tool, paper piercing tool. It actually goes along with this mat. I'm just going to run that around in circles right down here at the base of this petal. So it's going to give it a cupped shape. Then I'm going to take that petal and flip it upside down, and I'm just going to run this back and forth across the top. So as you can see, it gives that more of a petal-like look to it. Going to do the same thing on this one, then flip that over and give that more of a curl. So I'm going to do all of my petals this way, and then I'll show you how to put it together. Well, let me stop for just a second because I almost forgot these. I'm going to grab these, flip these over, and the way that I do those is I just start at the base of that leaf and I run the back end handle across each of those, and so it's going to give that more of a curled effect. Then for the center of my flower, this is a little bit too small, so I'm going to take the top of my glue and I'm going to use that, and I'm just going to push that down into the center of that paper, work it around and around in circles, and it'll give that sort of a domed look, just like that. So I'm going to get these petals done and I'll be right back. This is where we're going to use our liquid glue. I'm just going to put a little dollop over here to the side, and I'm going to be using my stylus to help me out. So I'm going to dip the tip of my petal in there, and then I'm going to bring my petal in here, and I'm going to hold it in place for just a second. Give that glue just a couple of seconds to grab a hold of that petal. And I'm just going to work my way around until I get all of my petals into place. I've got that done. Now I'm going to use my Stampin' Dimensionals. Going to take the center of my flower and flip that over. And I'm actually going to add 3. That gives me the height that I need to get that in the center of the flower and still allow this piece to be dome shaped. I'll stick that right down in the center. Give that a little push, and then you can fluff those back up. The next thing I'm going to do is grab my Big Shot and my gold foil sheet, and this is the thinlet that I'm going to use, and we will have to do a little bit of trimming on top of cutting this out. So I'm going to get this run through and cut out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut right down through here like this, leaving a good amount of space between those points and the edge of my paper. Then I'm going to come in with my scissors and I'm going to trim around the outside of this shape. And I'm going to try my best to keep these borders around the outside as close to the size of these as I possibly can. I've taken that shape and applied some multi-purpose liquid glue to the back, and now I'm going to adhere that down to the front left side of my card. I'm going to lay my flower in place and then grab my 2 little pieces of leaves here and decide where I want those to live. That looks like a good spot. So I'm just going to move my flower out of the way, put a little glue right there, hold that in place just for a second, put Put a little glue right here. Then I'll add glue to the back of my flower. Put that right there. Now I'm going to set this to the side, and I'm going to show you what my idea is for the inside of this card. So this is where I'm going to use my stamp set, and what I want this to say is "You are amazing." Now as you can see, this stamp right here says "Are simply." I want to take the "simply" out. I'm just going to use my garden green to stamp this with. You can use whatever color you like, but I'm going to grab a piece of some painter's tape. I tell you, I love using Post-it note and painter's tape in my craft room because it comes in so handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the word "you," and as a matter of fact, I'm going to use my grid paper to help me line things up. I'm going to stamp "you," and I'm just going to come over here and try to ink up just the word "are." Remove that painter's tape. Then I want to stamp this just below it, and I couldn't get above it to see, and I did stamp it a little bit crooked. So when you're stamping yours, just make sure that you can look down directly above it and get that straight. So for the amazing, I'm just going to pull this down so I can see a little bit better and get a little bit more over the top of it, and hopefully I will get this straight. Wait, I just about stamped it upside down. That would have not been fun, would it? Okay, so you can usually stamp straight when you're able to look down on the top of it. Now there is a floral image in here that you could use if you want to stamp. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. My block over here, which this is not really quite big enough, but it'll work okay. Let me get my ink back open again. Actually, instead of the garden green for this, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Berry Burst. So I'm just going to take this, and because leaves are not typically pink, I'm just going to stamp this flower kind of off the edge down here, because I really want just more of the floral image and not really the leaves, because I didn't want those to be pink. Now something else you can consider doing if you like, I'm going to clean off my brush here and get all that brown out. Now you can do this if you choose to, but you certainly don't have to. You can take this aqua painter and come in here and just rub over the top of that stamped image and actually move some of this color around and give these petals a little bit of color. Now even though that is not dry, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. I'm just going to use my multi-purpose liquid glue because it's sitting right here. You can use whatever adhesive you like. Put some on the back. Hopefully that flower has had enough time to stay stuck to the front of my card. Then I'm going to flip this over, oopsie, and lay that right inside my card. And then you still have plenty of room to add a handwritten note if you like.